Next, we're going to spend a very small amount of time touching on some of the main points of AWS's physical global infrastructure. And what I want to talk about in this video, in particular, are AWS regions, availability zones, and edge locations. AWS regions are physically separated clusters of AWS availability zones. And availability zones are physically separated and isolated compute clusters, which are connected with low latency, high throughput, and highly redundant networking. So what you're looking at in this image are pictures of AWS regions. So each of those yellow circles is an AWS region, and the number inside the circle represents the amount of availability zones inside each region. Now, we'll definitely talk more about auto-scaling and high availability in a future video, but for now, suffice to say that you can actually deploy a lot of services into multiple availability zones within each region. And what that means for you is high availability and fault tolerance, because if anything were to happen in any of those single regions, your application or your service would still be good to go because you're deployed across multiple availability zones. And then just as a quick reference, there's also edge locations, which are locations around the world that make it quicker to serve whatever cached content you have to local end users. So for example, if you have a web application or some content hosted in a region in America, and you want to get content as quickly as possible to your end users in Europe, then edge locations would be what help you do it. And now I'd like to take a quick second to really solidify the relationship between regions and availability zones by using the AWS CLI for the first time. So for this one, we're going to need the Cloud9 environment that we set up earlier. And in the terminal in the Cloud9 environment, just type in AWS EC2 describe availability zones. And what we want this to do is in any particular region, if we use this AWS CLI command, we want it to describe the availability zones in whatever region this Cloud9 environment is deployed in. Now remember, I deployed mine in North Virginia, so when I run this command, I expect to see availability zones for North Virginia. And that's exactly what happens. I get a JSON object back with the 6 availability zones that are inside North Virginia. And that'll about wrap it up for this video. So we quickly touched on AWS's global physical infrastructure. And if all of that makes sense, then feel free to continue. And next we'll talk about AWS's shared security responsibility model.